7 months ago, I had a marriage, a job, and a best friend I trusted with my life. Now, I'm living in a motel that charges by the week, eating discount ramen from a hot water kettle, and trying to survive on freelance gigs that barely cover the rent. My name is Elena Price, I'm 34, and I used to believe in plans 5-year ones, 10-year ones, the kind you frame in your head when life feels steady. Then I caught my husband, Justin, in bed with my best friend, Natalie, and the future I'd built crumbled in one afternoon. The betrayal was surgical. Within 2 weeks, I lost my job, clients pulled, emails dried up, meetings canceled without explanation. The divorce drained what was left of my savings. Friends stopped answering. Even my landlord gave me 2 weeks' notice as a courtesy, like pity was something you could gift someone on the way out. That's how I ended up here, tucked between a used car lot and a boarded-up diner, in a room that smells like mildew and old cigarettes. If you've ever been gutted so cleanly that you start to wonder if you imagined it all, I see you. I was you. Before we continue, thank you for being here. For listening. For choosing to sit inside someone else's mess for a little while. If you believe in truth, in the slow kind of healing that starts when the lies stop, consider subscribing. It's free, and it helps this story reach others who need a reminder that rock bottom is still ground, and you can build something from there. Now, let me tell you what happened next. As already said, my name is Elena Price. I'm 34, and I live above a nail salon on the east side of Milwaukee, in a sublet that wasn't listed anywhere official, just passed down by a friend of a friend who said, "You'll be safe here." The walls are sun-bleached pink, not soft or sweet, more like the color of dried peonies someone forgot to water. The window leaks in winter. I sleep on a mattress directly on the floor and cook on a hot plate so old the coil rattles. But it's quiet mostly, and that counts for something these days. Before this, I had a routine so polished it gleamed. I was a senior financial advisor at a mid-sized wealth firm downtown. I wore structured blazers, took phone calls while walking to the corner coffee shop, and came home to Rob, who was always halfway through making dinner, glass of wine ready for me on the counter. I thought we were one of those couples who made sense to people. The kind who'd say, "We just clicked," and really mean it. Rachel, my sister, loved him. I trusted that. It all cracked the morning I walked into work and found my name missing from the internal portal. At first, I thought it was just a system update. Then emails stopped coming. My calendar was wiped clean. People avoided eye contact in the break room. I had to ask the receptionist if I'd been fired. She looked up at me like I'd grown another head, then said someone from HR would circle back. No one did. By the end of the week, my access card had stopped working. I left with nothing but a reusable coffee mug and a strange hollowness in my chest. Rob said the right things. Said it must be a misunderstanding. Poured me tea like I was a fragile bird he didn't know how to hold. But he started going to bed earlier, showering with the door locked. He forgot things, small things at first, like my mom's anniversary, then big things, like our lease renewal. The night I found his phone unlocked on the kitchen counter, I wasn't even snooping. I was setting an alarm for him. That's how I found the thread. Her name saved under initials, but the messages weren't subtle. My sister. My own sister. Rachel swore it wasn't emotional. That it just happened. That she didn't mean to hurt me, and Rob was already pulling away. The thing is, I might have believed her if it weren't for what came next. Anonymous complaints filed against me at work. Audits of my client reports. A whisper campaign, slow and deliberate, that painted me as reckless, manipulative, even unstable. They didn't just take my job. They rearranged my reputation, piece by piece, until I barely recognized the woman people said I was. The thing about losing everything at once is that you stop waiting for explanations. You just start packing. I withdrew the last of my savings, found the cheapest place that didn't smell like rot, and stayed quiet. Milwaukee was loud enough to hide in. I deleted my LinkedIn, dyed my hair, and gave myself 2 rules: no calls from unknown numbers, and no contact with anyone who used to know me before. I told myself I'd figure things out, that this was temporary, that maybe the universe was clearing the field so something better could grow. But even that felt like a lie. Most nights I couldn't hear my own thoughts over the thud of betrayal. Then one Tuesday, I got a security notification on an old email I hadn't checked in years. A safety deposit box under my mother's name, Elaine Price, had been accessed. I sat frozen, tea going cold in my hands. My mother had been dead 23 years. Died in a car crash when I was 11. I didn't even know she had a safety deposit box. The bank was 2 towns over, the kind that still used paper forms and rotary pens. I didn't ask how they found me. I just showed my ID and signed the line, fingers trembling. Inside was a manila envelope, a flash drive, and a handwritten note folded into quarters like it had been waiting for me all along. The note said, "Elena, they'll come for your name before your life. Don't let them have either." Mom. I sat in the car for a long time after that, parked in the farthest corner of the lot, staring at the dash. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. Just held the envelope in my lap like it could answer a question I hadn't learned how to ask. Whatever this was, it started long before me. But maybe it wasn't too late to finish it. The safety deposit box was older than I expected, metal corroded around the edges, with that hospital storage smell, dust mixed with something sterile, forgotten. I held the flash drive like it might burn me, tucked the note back inside like it was sacred, then drove for hours without turning the radio on. It wasn't until I got home, sat on the floor cross-legged with the blinds half closed, that I realized I was scared to know what she'd left me. There's something about being warned from the grave that makes you feel like you're already in danger, whether you understand why or not. I had to borrow an old laptop from my upstairs neighbor just to open the files, the kind of machine with peeling stickers and a humming fan that never shut off. The flash drive needed a password. I tried everything obvious: her birthday, my name, the year she died. Nothing worked. I stared at the screen for hours, letting the blinking cursor mock me, until my eyes watered. So I turned to the other thing, the storage key card tucked inside the envelope, thin and laminated, labeled Sparrow Unit 11B. I'd never heard her mention it before, but it felt like a lead. The facility was in Kenosha, tucked between a defunct bowling alley and an outlet strip mall that hadn't been updated since the early 2000s. The woman at the front desk gave me a sympathetic look when she scanned the card, said it hadn't been used since 2002. The air inside the unit hit me like a wall, dry, metallic, heavy with time. Most of it was filled with boxes marked receipts, logs, statements, but one corner had a rusted file cabinet with tape over the drawers, initials scrawled in my mother's handwriting. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside were names I recognized, old clients from my firm, flagged accounts I'd questioned years ago but had been told were clean. One folder had my mother's name typed neatly across the top, dated 1990 to 1993. Another folder was thicker, bursting with printouts, transaction summaries, offshore details tied to shell companies I thought only existed on paper. Then I saw my own name. Elena M. Price, Contingency Path. My stomach dropped. I didn't know what that meant. Didn't want to believe any version of my mother had been preparing for this that long ago. I closed the drawer slowly. There was also a photo, wedged between folders like an afterthought. My mother, smiling in a stiff shoulder-padded blazer, standing beside the founder of the firm I worked at until they erased me. The timestamp read 1992. I stared at her face, softer than I remembered, full of edges I'd forgotten. She was my age in that photo. Maybe younger. I traced her expression with my thumb, wondering who she was back then, what she knew, and what she'd given up to bury all of this so far beneath the surface. Suddenly it felt like I hadn't just lost a mother, I'd misunderstood her entirely. I brought the photo home, set it next to my bed, and stayed awake until morning trying to string the pieces together. If she worked for them, even peripherally, it explained the access, the patterns I was beginning to see. But why keep it hidden? Why wait until after she was gone to say anything? Maybe she thought I wouldn't need it, maybe she hoped the past would stay buried. Or maybe she knew how these people worked, how reputations are sandcastles to them, easily washed away if they become inconvenient. It made sense now in a way that chilled me. Over the next week, I cataloged the files, sorting them into piles with post-it notes, mapping out the overlaps. A few documents were in code, handwritten in cursive so sharp it looked like it belonged in a ledger, not a diary. One note mentioned Rachel. The date was recent. I didn't understand how my sister fit into something that started before we were even born, but her name was there, tied to a fund in the Caymans, masked through two shell entities. One of them used my social security number as a proxy. That's when the nausea hit, the kind you don't shake. I thought about confronting her right away, dialing her number and demanding the truth, but something in me held back. Maybe I was afraid of what she'd say or how easily she might lie. Maybe I didn't want to hear it, not like that. I printed the documents instead, kept them folded in my bag like they might anchor me if I started slipping again. Some part of me still wanted to believe there was a good explanation, some twist I hadn't seen yet. But as I stared at the photo of my mother night after night, I felt her silence start to speak. I hadn't spoken to Rachel in months, but she still called sometimes, usually late, when guilt must have been loudest. The first few times I didn't answer. Then one night I picked up. Her voice was softer than I remembered, like she'd been rehearsing tenderness and finally forgot the lines. She asked how I was, if I'd been eating, if I'd found work. Small talk designed to hide something heavy underneath. I told her I was fine, and she said she was glad, then paused too long, as if she wanted to say more but couldn't find a version that didn't collapse her. She'd always been the confident one, the girl who wore eyeliner in 8th grade and never smudged it, the one who made life look easy while I spent mine double-checking everything. I used to envy that lightness in her, the way she could walk into a room and be instantly known, instantly liked. Growing up, she'd joke that I was the serious one, the worrier, the keeper of everyone's mistakes. Maybe she was right. Maybe that's why what she did hurt in a way that burned quieter, but lasted longer, the kind that doesn't scream, it just hums under your skin. I saw her again by accident, at a small cafe near the lake. She was sitting alone, scrolling through her phone, stirring a coffee that had gone cold. I almost walked past, almost let her exist in some other version of my city where I didn't have to remember what she'd done. But she looked up, and there it was, the recognition, the small gasp of shared memory that neither of us could swallow. She smiled, hesitant, said, "Elena," like the word itself might disintegrate if she held it wrong. I sat down before I could change my mind. We didn't talk about Rob, not right away. She asked about my apartment, my work, my health. I asked about her job at the firm, pretending I didn't already know the company name from the files. She said it was going well, that she'd been promoted, that she'd finally found her rhythm. I watched her talk, the same easy tone she used when we were kids explaining away broken rules. I wanted to ask if she ever thought about what it costs to survive that easily. Instead, I told her mom left me something. That's when her hand froze halfway to her cup. Her eyes started to the window, like she was checking for someone. She said she didn't know what I meant, that I must be mistaken. I told her I'd been to the storage unit, that I'd seen the files, and that I knew she was listed. Her jaw clenched, the kind of reflex you can't fake. She said, "You shouldn't have gone there," which wasn't denial, it was instruction. I asked her what she meant, and she looked at me like I was already past saving, said quietly, "You don't understand who you're dealing with, Lena. You were never supposed to." The rest of the cafe fell away after that. The air shifted, thick with the kind of truth you can't push back into silence once it's spoken. She said she hadn't meant for any of this to touch me, that she'd been in over her head for years, that it started as a small favor for someone who promised to help with her debts. She said names like they were sharp objects, careful not to drop them. Then she stopped talking altogether, eyes glossy, voice breaking on my name. "It's bigger than you think," she whispered, "and it started before us." I wanted to hate her, but I couldn't. The fear in her face looked too familiar, like the kind I'd seen in the mirror after losing everything. She reached across the table, her hand trembling as it brushed mine. She said she didn't know how deep it went, that the files were only part of it, that Mom had gotten close to exposing something before she died. "They made it look like an accident," she said, her voice so small I almost missed it. I sat there, frozen, the noise of the espresso machine drowning out the sound of my heartbeat. When I left the cafe, the air outside was sharp with wind, the kind that carries winter even in early spring. I stood on the sidewalk, staring at the lake, feeling like the ground had shifted again beneath my feet. Rachel stayed inside, head bowed over her phone, maybe already texting someone about what she'd said. I walked home slowly, trying to remember every word, every flicker of guilt in her expression. It was the first time I realized Mom hadn't just left me evidence, she'd left me unfinished work, the kind that lingers until someone decides to see it through. The next morning I woke with the kind of headache that feels like leftover fear, dull but pulsing behind your eyes, refusing to let go. I sat on the floor, surrounded by folders and printouts, highlighter caps scattered like confetti across old receipts. I didn't have a plan, just a feeling that something inside the paperwork mattered more than I understood. The language was careful, distant, corporate, words meant to hide what they really meant. But the dates lined up, the transfers made patterns, and the same 5 names circled back over and over again like shadows that hadn't fully disappeared. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, just took the train downstate to an address I'd found scribbled in the margin of one file. It led to a man named Harold. Mid-70s, graying at the temples, with a voice like gravel and eyes that moved too fast. He said he used to audit risk accounts before things got complicated. He didn't ask how I found him, just invited me in and offered stale biscuits from a tin. I showed him one file. Just one, and he exhaled so hard it shook the air between us. Then he nodded like he'd been waiting. He said my mother wasn't just an analyst, she was the reason 3 senior partners took early retirement in '94. Said she found inconsistencies they thought she wouldn't notice. Said she kept notes, always, paper copies, off-network, in handwriting only she could decipher. She didn't trust anyone, he said, not after what happened to Claire Dawson. I didn't know who that was, but I wrote it down. He warned me about a name I hadn't seen before, a consultant who moved money across shelves with no signature trail. He's not in the files because he never needed to be, Harold whispered. He's the eraser. Back home, I started connecting what I could, taping up timelines on my wall like a slow-moving storm. The same fund that Rachel's name was tied to showed signs of being siphoned in 2001, right after Mom died. I traced an anonymous payment into my college fund, the one I thought came from a distant uncle. The math didn't lie. Someone had been building a paper version of my life, parallel and hidden, just in case they needed it. I didn't know if Mom had planned to leave it for me or if I was just the last thread left. I spent days rereading her handwriting, tracing the same curves she must have formed while listening for footsteps, knowing someone might come looking. I began to recognize her tone, how she circled things 3 times when they mattered, how she used underlines instead of exclamation points. She never said she was scared, but you could feel it, tucked into the margins, like the page itself was holding its breath. I stopped feeling angry with her then, started understanding the kind of woman she had been. Someone who never asked for safety, just carved out enough space for her daughter to choose. I opened a co-working account under a different name, Maureen Ellis, a combination of her middle name and my grandmother's surname. I used burner emails, rerouted IP addresses, printed everything at random libraries across the city. It wasn't about secrecy exactly, more about control, the kind I hadn't felt in months. I reached out to a former compliance officer who left the firm 3 years ago and was now working as a paralegal in Racine. She responded the same day. "I've been waiting for this," she wrote. Then she attached 3 redacted reports with one phrase repeated, irregular movement masked as client reinvestment. Everything built slowly. I didn't rush, didn't corner anyone, just gathered piece after piece like a story that didn't want to be told unless you were patient enough to listen. I learned how to read between lines, how to fold meaning into silence, how to ask questions without sounding like I was searching. Some people talked because they were tired, others because they thought I was someone else. But the truth was the same. My name had been used because it was convenient, because I'd been trusted, because someone thought I wouldn't look too closely. But I was my mother's daughter. I printed 1 copy of everything, just one, and stored it in a safety box under a name that doesn't belong to me, just in case. I started sending letters, handwritten and unsigned, to 2 regulatory offices and 1 nonprofit that tracks financial fraud. I didn't need attention, just action. The firm began laying off staff, quietly, subtly, without headlines. A few names disappeared from the directories. I kept my head down, kept showing up at the library, kept watching it all unfold like a quiet reckoning. My mother hadn't left a revenge plan, she'd left a blueprint. For someone who'd know how to finish it. The story didn't break open the way I thought it might. There were no headlines, no televised trials, just a slow erosion of silence, like water finding its way through stone. I watched from a distance as the firm changed names, then merged, then quietly dissolved certain departments. A few executive profiles disappeared from the website, entire portfolios were transferred overnight, and people who had smiled at me in elevators started scrubbing their digital footprints. It was the kind of ending that doesn't announce itself, just shifts the air around you until you realize you can breathe again. Rob left town 3 weeks after the layoffs began. His social media went dark. Mutual friends said he was taking time to reset, whatever that meant. I didn't care where he went. I didn't wish him anything. There's a stillness that comes when you stop trying to understand someone who never made space for your survival, and I had already given him more than enough pages in my story. Sometimes I still dream about him, but he's always blurry, like someone I knew in a different life, someone who forgot to say goodbye before the world changed. Rachel pled out, her name buried in a docket most people won't read, her record sealed under a cooperation agreement. I didn't attend her hearing, didn't answer the letter she sent afterward. She wrote that she was sorry, that she never wanted to hurt me, that she missed me. The paper smelled like lavender, like our childhood bathroom. I kept it folded in a drawer for a while, unsure if forgiveness needed to be said out loud or if it could just be lived quietly. I don't think she knows what Mom left behind, or how much of it was already meant for me. Some things never made it into the files, like the way Mom hummed when she folded laundry, or how she used to run her fingers through my hair before bed, tracing lines only she knew. I started writing those down too, not because they were evidence, but because they mattered, because memory is its own kind of ledger, one that doesn't lie. I don't think she ever thought she'd be a whistleblower. She just saw something she couldn't live with and made a choice to protect me the only way she knew how, by hiding the truth until I was ready to find it. I volunteer at the library now, running free financial literacy classes every Tuesday night, mostly for women who never got taught what a balance sheet means or how to read loan terms without getting buried. Sometimes I see girls come in with strollers, tired eyes, notebooks half filled with questions they're afraid to ask. I tell them it's okay to start late, that learning how money works is a kind of self-rescue. One of them told me last week that it was the first time she didn't feel stupid talking about numbers. I smiled and said, "It's not you, it's the system." I don't use my real name when I teach, not because I'm afraid, but because it doesn't feel necessary anymore. The version of Elena Price who lost everything is still inside me, but she's quieter now, steady, the way a scar stops aching once it learns the weather. I rent a new place near the edge of the city, small but sunlit, with a kitchen big enough for real meals and a garden box I keep trying to make bloom. I planted peonies last spring, the kind Mom used to love, and every morning I check them like they're a promise. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't opened the envelope, if I'd let the warning sit untouched, if I'd chosen comfort over clarity. But then I remember the sound of my own voice asking questions no one wanted to answer, and I know this was the only way forward. My mother raised me to be observant, to trust silence without fearing it, to understand that some storms don't pass until you walk straight through them. She didn't need to see the ending to know how it would unfold. She just needed to believe that I'd make it there. There's a difference between being erased and walking away, and I finally understand that now. They tried to rewrite my story, tried to bury my name under paperwork and accusation, but I found it again, tucked into the spaces my mother left behind, wrapped in the quiet defiance of a woman who loved deeply and prepared quietly. I don't want anyone to be afraid of starting over, not if they can help it. So I show up, week after week, and hand out what I know because sometimes the only way to keep a name alive is to use it for someone else.